before. So I will add a new work item, and this work item will be specifically tied. It will be tied to the specific sprint. So I can say I had to plan. So planning phase. This was my task, and it was my task. So as you can see on this iteration field, as you're configuring the task, so automatically by default it's adding an issue. I don't think I can change that with the subscription, this free version of DevOps. But if you have a subscription that you can use, I think you can definitely add more labels to your tasks. But now by default it's going to add an issue. So my task was the planning phase. I've assigned it to myself. Then during the on the iteration field, you can already see that it has assigned it to sprint 1. So in case I want to move this task to a different sprint, you can select the sprint. So in this case, that was my task for sprint 1. I will save and close. And then let's say, so once you do that, you will now have a slightly different view. You will get to see the task that needs to be done in sprint 1. And once I complete it, now you can just move it along these 3 columns, depending on where you are on working on that specific task. So perhaps once I complete this, my next task is in sprint 2. I will now move to sprint 2. And then I will now create a new work item. And I'll perhaps say I'm to design the interface. That is a task for sprint 2. So it's already changed the sprint to sprint 2. And then I will click and save. I will save and close that. So you see I'm in the sprint 2 view, and I'm able to see a list of the tasks that I'm supposed to do within this sprint. So as a team lead, as a team member, you're able to get into DevOps and see the status of your entire team. So this is a tool that you can use to just manage your product as you build on it. So you can just see, so for sprint 2, my task was to design the interface. If I can also go back to sprint 1, I will see that my task was, to complete the planning phase. And if I'm able to complete it, I can move it to the done pane. Okay, so I need to add the task here first. So in case there are some specific tasks that need to be done, design navbar, right? Assign it to myself. So you can also assign it to people on this view. So it's very easy to use. Now you can always navigate this from one column to the other. So once you're done, you've met the definition of done your team had, you'll be able to have your product done, and everyone will know that we're done with that feature, and we can move on to the next. So I think that is like a basic introduction to the Azure DevOps tool. And just before I hand it over to my colleague, just below here, if I can click on the organization itself, in case you might want to modify some settings. So if you click on the organization, on the bottom left, you can see some organization settings pane. So you can just select that. And from there, you can do some specific settings for your product on an organizational level. So you're able to manage the different projects inside your organization. So far, we only have one project. In case you have a different project you're working on, you can always add a new project. You can say white sky. You can give it a description, make it private, then create. So you can now manage your organization on this section of DevOps. And then you're also able to access this settings page, but on a project level. So you can also just get in there and see what kind of settings you can change. You will see a list of all the users you add here. You can change the access level that you give each and every user. So I'll advise and I'll recommend this. So everyone, including and most specifically the team leads, kindly do get just have a deeper look into Azure DevOps. Just get in there and see the different things that you can achieve. So as I said, in case this is on the organizational level. So in case you want to do some specific settings, but on the project level, what you do is select your project. And then once you have your project here, you'll now find the project settings, and you'll now be able to see the specific settings that you can specify. You can specify your teams. so we have a lot of things here, including the project configuration. There is something we were doing about setting the sprints. So this is also a different way of setting the sprints. You can always add a new sprint or remove one sprint that you have. So I don't know if you have any questions so far. So it's a very broad tool that you'll keep discovering new things that you can use. But what I've shown you is the basic that you will need to achieve, the goal that you have for this particular product. So I think that's it. I don't know if I've left anything that is very important for you at this point. Yeah, and so as you can see, so this is the Black Sky project, and after adding the work items, I'm able to see a summary of what I have configured. So I can see I have 6 work items created. Out of the 6, 2 are completed. So you can always have like an overview stats presentation here of how the status that your product has. So I think I will leave it to Cyrus to take over and show us setting pipelines. So he'll introduce us to what this means. And the final thing, just as we can use GitHub to host our code base, that is also facilitated in Azure DevOps. So in case you're not interested in using GitHub for your code, you can use the Azure Repos. So you will just navigate to the Azure Repos. It's the same interface and the same procedure as you're using GitHub. You can clone your project from here, work on it, and upload your code directly on Visual Studio on Azure DevOps. So you'll be using Azure Repos instead. And so when it comes to building your pipelines, but I'll leave that to Cyrus to take over. So in case you have any questions, I'll be on the chat. I think I'll be able to address any question you have. I can hand it over to Cyrus to continue with the rest of the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Allow me to share my screen. I can hear some echo, and now it's okay. Just okay. Good morning, guys. My name is Cyrus Nirangu, and I am a student ambassador, a Microsoft Learn Student Ambassador, and a student at St. Paul's University. And welcome to the Equity ADC Hackathon. Today, I am going to be taking you through an overview of what it means to have your project from at your laptop through to GitHub, then over to DevOps. Now, Julia has shown us how Azure DevOps can be a very quickly, I could say it's like a world on its own, whereby you're able to do everything from Azure DevOps without even needing to do things like GitHub and stuff. But just to give you some context, we're going to have a small application here. This is a small application that is open source on GitHub. And what we are doing is we are working on, so this is a project that was on my Git version control. Now I have pushed it to GitHub. Now how can I get it to Azure DevOps? So first things first, before we continue, I'd like to address some questions on the chat. So I can see here Dixon said, okay. Tony Ogeta said, hey, let's say you're from School of Computing and the other students, you need to form a team, yet you don't know neither their contacts. How do you go about that? So probably you would just come here and you just click on this invite. So there's a place where you can invite everyone. I think it's just here in Teams. It's just somewhere over here. You're able to invite people who are in your organization. I don't know where that team is. Let's just see. Go back again. My Wi-Fi. Here's where you can invite people. Now in the panel for the dashboard, like the minute you just create a team, you're able to see who you can invite here, and you can choose which team you want to invite them. Now, I would advise the owner of the team should be probably technical in order to understand how everything is going. So you can just use multiple email addresses, just as you've been told there. So you would need the email addresses, and then they would be inside the application. So what happens when they're inside the application? So just as Julia said, you just instead of creating a dashboard, you go to boards, you assign work items, whether it's an epic, a feature, or a task, which means an epic is a feature. So for example, this small repository we have here, an epic might be authentication. For the first sprint, say you want to do Django user management, because probably your whole application is going to be accessing probably the Graph API. You decide to use GraphQL to make it easier. And then sprint 1, you want to do user management. So this small application, the first task is going to be login. The second task is going to be log out. The third one is going to be sign up with email confirmation. The fifth one, change password, forgot password, delete account, and update account details. So here you've already done all those simple CRUD operations that are needed by a website, that is create, updates. Yeah, I can see a hand is up. Is there a question?
Hi, good.
Yeah.
Hi, Cyrus.
Yes.
This is Joyce from Equity. I just wanted to also chip into that question on the forming of groups. Thank you for taking them through and how they can use the tools to collaborate.
Yes.
But now from also another perspective, it would be important, and what we would recommend is that they try and group up with people that we also received this question through the email, and the leadership within the university, if it's University of Nairobi, Elisha Obade is our lead from the faculty, and then from Meru University, we are dealing with Dr. Amos Kirongo. So please get in touch with them. I think they're also creating channels where you can get to know each other or know all the students who are participating, so that it's also easier to communicate. Then within that group, if you see individuals who you can collaborate with or can complement each other in terms of your skills, then that can also be something you consider before you form a team or go in to take the challenge together. Because remember, you're all working towards also winning some financial prize. So it needs to be people you can work with, people you trust, who you have synergies with and want to form groups. Remember, you can also do this project alone. You're not limited that you have to be in a group, but you may go faster and further if you collaborate with each other. But that would be my recommendation, my advice. Then once you identify who you can work with, then can come and use the tools that Cyrus has demonstrated to help you work and still keep track of your activities and the initiatives and what you're building together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joyce. I was talking about features and tasks. So when you create a task could be like creating the login, and those tasks are what Julia was trying to show us on the boards, whereby you can be able to change them from doing to done. And these tasks are where I really want you guys to put a lot of emphasis on, because this is where a lot of people end up failing. You need if you have any project management roles, she's very free and open. Anyway, she is a very good project manager, and she has basically helped us understand what Scrum and Agile means. So what Scrum and Agile means is they're both different approaches of how you can break down your application or projects from a technical standpoint, and how you are able to distribute tasks to everyone. Now, you need to know that Azure DevOps is not for technical things only. For example, you might have, when your sprint is taking place, you might want to have a presentation. You might want someone to do research on data. So you need to just add all those people here and assign them their tasks, and everybody is going to collaborate here, regardless of whether they are coding or whether they are, and they're able to show the work that was done on the application. Okay, moving on. Here we have Azure Repos. Now, Azure Repos is, just as Julia said, it's a way of connecting Git directly to your application. So you do not need to have your application hosted externally on GitHub. You just need to come and use, now this is, I'm speaking to technical guys. Git is a version control mechanism, I would say, and it is just a way of tracking your application it is just a way of tracking your application as you progress as a team. So for example, as Julia showed us, you might have an epic for working on the backend and an epic for the front end. So when you have an epic for the front end and the backend, you need to have like different branches that are working together towards the main branch. It is advised not to work again on the main branch, so that in case the main code fails, you are able to track and see where the others, or whether a merge into the main branch fails, you're able to see what is going on the breaking changes. Okay. Could you kindly, like, I don't know if Irene can help us mute all mics. There we go. Okay, sorry for the noise. Now, one thing is you are able to import a repository. So for example, you can import a repository from Git. You can import it from this version control for a long time ago, and you can specify whether it requires authentication and specify the password, and you're just going to get it here. Now, the other hand is you can just come to Git, and then you can just add the origin. Let me just show you a small sample project. No, not there. So we can have a small application like this one, and then open in terminal. And because now this one is hosted on GitHub, let me just remove the origin. Now, in order to check Git remote. Okay, let me just add this first and then I'll troubleshoot later. So we want to add now this repo. Now this is similar to what GitHub is, but then now instead of having now code on GitHub, code on, instead of having everything decentralized, you can have everything in one place. So instead of now this is how you add your repository. You see now it's already added. So when we say git push user origin master, because this is on the master branch, I need to put in my password, which I haven't set up. Okay, I haven't set up the password yet. Okay, so you can already see how easy it is for you to create your application. I'm going to go back there and I'm going to show you how we can be able to connect that. Now you are able to see the commits that people are making to the application, which means you're able to have, what do I say? Accountability towards the people of the team, which means even the non-technical teams can be able to see what's going on. You're able to tag your application by releases, which means when you do, for example, sprint 1, you're able to tag authentication, then you do user, you're able to do pull requests, everything similar to what you do in GitHub, you can be able to do here on Azure Repos. Now, Azure Repos is a small GitHub save for your application. Now we have Azure Pipelines. Now, if you come from GitHub, you probably are well versed with what pipelines are. So pipelines are a way of creating a continuous integration and continuous development of your application. And excuse me, I might have dropped out the call. Just a minute. this is all too much to learn in one day, and I'm going to drop my email so that you can reach out to me. In case you guys want to have a team, you'd like me to like show you as a team where you're missing out, I'd be really happy to explain in depth what is going on. Now, this is just GitHub. Don't worry about what this is. This is a small repository this is a small repository that has, I'm using Flutter. Now the language doesn't matter, but specifically why I wanted to show you this was because this one has GitHub Actions working, and you can see they're failing. So X's means they're failing. So with Azure Pipelines, you're able to do and able to see your application and able to visualize where everything is going wrong. So for example, whether your application failed installing dependencies, whether your application failed on the tests. So you can see, for example, here we have run tests that wasn't even checked, but everything else succeeded except installing dependencies. So you're able to see with Azure Pipelines where everything went wrong. So for example, if we were to set up a small pipeline with that, so you can see here we already, I can see there's a question on the chat. Okay, so here you can see Pipelines is requesting for authorization to access repositories in your GitHub. And so let me just grant to here, because here is where there is useful information, and authorize Azure Pipelines. Yes, now you can see I am able to see all the projects that I have been working on my application. And let's just start with the very good. Let me just not look for my repositories. Let me just find where is it? Very good app. Okay, it's not here. Seems not to be here. But anyway, now we have connected. I need to find that one because that one is the one that has the pipelines. Just give me a minute. 0101 solutions. Is it a private repository? No, it's a public one. Then why is it not? Let me see. I probably haven't granted access. No, I have granted. Okay, everything is in order. So let's go back. So we were creating our pipeline. Yeah. Anyway, let's just create with any small application. So here is an image uploader that is using Azure. Yeah, here, let me just look for my repositories. Nope, it's not there. Anyway, approve and install. So what we are doing right now is we are acquiring repositories from GitHub, and we are putting it in our application in Azure Pipelines. So we are configuring a pipeline from Azure Repos, from GitHub to Azure Pipelines that is going to be deployed. Now, you can already see it has detected the type of application that we have. So here, well, for example, assuming you're going to use Node.js, if you are going to be deploying, your Node.js application together with its front end coupled, then there's an alternative here of deploying Node.js with React, deploying Node.js with Angular, and deploying your Node.js project that uses what is it called? Server-side rendering and what are they called? Templating engines like Pug, Handlebars. So this is how you can deploy that without using a separate API and React. This is how you deploy using with Vue. These are using, and now, for example, after just deploying a simple API, so we're just going to deploy this. because it's an express application. Yeah. You choose the subscription we have. So this is a student subscription. By the way, Microsoft does give students free subscriptions. I don't know if Julia has the link below. I think we can just call the web app name is that validate and configure. Now what Azure is doing is it's creating some YAML files for updating. I am not so sure this is going to run because there are some credentials that I haven't configured yet. But generally, this is a YAML file that is going to dictate everything. As it is, I don't think there is anything that you need to change because the pipeline has already added your Azure subscription number. It has already deployed, created your VM image. It has already detected which version of Node.js it is going to install. It is going to deploy a build stage. And it is going to have a job for deployment, which means you're going to always have continuous deployment within your application. And if we save and run this, so we can say this is initial setup, configuring GitHub with Azure Pipelines. Yeah, and commit directly to the local storage branch. You can choose to create a new branch, or however, why it's asking us to create this, it's because this YAML file now has been added to the application. So now this YAML file, even now when you're going to be creating this application, you need to pull again because now the application has been updated. Now you can already see, for example, now if all you guys decide, hypothetically speaking, you decide to collaborate on GitHub, you can quickly move your application here, and you can already see now you have the build stage, and you can start building your application, and you can choose where to deploy it. You can check the jobs. This is where a lot of people always feel like the stomach is turning, and you're able to see what's going on. So for example, here we can see the build failed. Oh wow, okay, I don't know why the build is failing. Errors. No hosted parallelism has been purchased or granted. Oh, okay. There's some problem with my subscription, but it's okay. But anyway, this is just how you are able to create a small application. You can choose to host it directly from your application through to Git. So for example, if we try, I'm assuming the password that they're asking for me here is for my application. Did I add the HTTPS? Yeah, I'm supposed to add the SSH because SSH is just, it's more better. Let me just delete this remote. If you don't know what SSH is, it's server side. Let me just Google what secure shell protocol. So they're just like it's a secure way other than using SSH, for example, to use to clone or to push your application to and from repositories. So for example, even here on GitHub, you can see you do have the option of cloning with HTTPS or with SSH. So yeah, I think I have tackled all the. If you guys okay, now for example, now I had this small application here because I wanted to show you, because we do have some tests running. Now if you guys have tests running in your application, this is where you're able to visualize, you're able to create test plans, you're able to configure what you want from your tests. For example, now let's see, you can test plan like and you're able to choose which iteration that test is from. So for example, you can choose sprint 1 has a test, sprint 1 has a test for authentication, which means you have automated tests that are running on your application as it builds. So for example, it's a very high level overview, but it's really possible in doing it, just similar to how you do GitHub Actions. So GitHub Actions just do everything for you. They set up the job according to how you have configured your workflows. Everything is just going to be okay. So this is just getting too much. Yeah. So according to how you've set up your workflows, it's just going to continue according to the YAML files. it's just going to step by step run through everything. And by default, most of these jobs you see here are set up on the YAML files. So jobs, you can see them, they're the ones that failed on our pipeline. For example, this is a fail, guaranteed to get a lot of these. So we can see there's a problem with the job. Now here's where you can be able to view all your jobs, and you're able to see very nice error messages that, yeah, probably I told you there are some env variables that I had not uploaded on the application because that is an open source application. You just need to download and create them on your own. But other than that, the process really is the same. Now, after testing your application and after building your application, you're able to create an artifact. Now, you're able to connect to a feed. So, for example, is let's say this is probably not as much as what you would require, but it's possible to create packages from Azure and push them to, for example, npm, pip, and even universal packages and etc. So, generally, I believe I have touched everything that needs to be done. Julia, I hope you're still on the chat. I probably, if there's something I have forgotten, I'd be happy to check out. Yeah, and here is where now things get interesting. According to how many builds now you have that succeed, the percentage is going to be reflective here. So all your teammates are going to be seeing you have 0% build pipeline success rates. So anyway, Julia, I think thank you so much for the time. If there is any question, I'd be happy to take it. I hope I answered all your questions. I hope I was clear in everything. I'd be happy so much to help you guys throughout the team. Meanwhile, there are some resources here that you can use to understand. So Julia was helping us talk about the Agile and Scrum process, which is mostly used by, I would say, all teams. Can we use Jenkins for the DevOps? I'm not so sure. We just need to use Azure DevOps because it's literally Azure DevOps. It does the same thing. So, and Microsoft has provided this feature for you guys in the hackathon. So the Agile process is, really don't look at this, but the Agile process is probably what we've talked about, breaking down your application into small modules, and it's what is mostly used to create minimum viable products, so MVPs. So for example, like I said, sprint 1 could be authentication, sprint 2 could be hooking up to authentication with the chat, with the main application, which means now users who are not authenticated see something different, and users who are authenticated get access to dashboards. Sprint 3 could be now features like accessing third-party APIs and stuff. And now that's how you build your application, slowly growing it and modularizing it such that even when one module is standing alone from the other, they can run on their own. That's how you create an Agile application, and this is how you're able to structure your epics, your tasks, and your issues when you're doing everything. Let me answer this question. Brian Ogutu is asking. Okay, Brian Ogutu is actually answering him on how we can configure continuous development pipelines from Jenkins to your CI. Really, all these things, all these tools have the same functionality, and I would advise you guys to just get comfortable with GitHub and Azure DevOps, because you'd be surprised how many organizations are using these kinds of tools out here. And I would say thank you so much for your time. I'm gonna kick it back to Julia, and yeah.
Julia, if you're talking, you must be muted.
Oh, okay. Probably Irene. Irene, are you still in the meeting?
Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I think my sound had an issue. So thank you so much, Cyrus and Julia, for taking us through. There are a couple of questions for you on the chat, so please, if you're able to address them, that will really help. Now I'm going to hand it over to Brian to take us through GitHub We have a couple of minutes, so Brian, you can take it away.
Okay, thanks, Irene. Hi, everyone. Maybe I could just share my screen and you let me know if it's visible. Can I get a thumbs up if you can see my screen and everything is visible?
I can see your screen.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so GitHub is basically a place where you could host your code. And while hosting your code, you'll use, it also has a mechanism for seeing the various versions of that code. And by the way, it's not just code. You could store any other files, even books. Let's say there are those PDFs that you're sent to in school, and at some point, we know laptops do disappear some of the times. So if you don't want to go through the hassle of, let's say, re-downloading those books and reorganizing them in the same way, you could maybe create a GitHub. You could create a GitHub account and store those files within the GitHub, within that GitHub account or within the repository that you created. So I mentioned two things. I mentioned GitHub, and then I also mentioned version control. So GitHub is where you host those files, and then version control is the tool that you use to track the various changes that you're making or the various updates that you're making to that collection, which we call a repository. And we have different tools that are used for version control. Git is one of them. We have others called like Subversion, AWS Code Commit, and many more. But Git is the most famous one that is used almost in all places. And GitHub uses Git. So it's important for you to understand what Git is and the commands that are used in Git. So version controlling has several advantages. So you're able to track the history of the various files, the various changes that you make. You're able to trace them, like who made this change, and when did it happen. And sometimes something could break in a software. Let's say you are working on some feature this week, and then when the feature was merged, something broke, and this could cause, let's say, an outage to your clients. So you merge something, and then things are breaking. It could be very hard to go to, let's say, the main branch where you have your changes and try to fix it. You could even break more. We always know that if you are in panic mode, chances are high that a lot of things could go wrong. So with version control, you can actually see which change was checked in that made the error to happen. So it's easy for you to revert that change, and everything will be normal as you continue to have some more time to fix the issues that you had. Up to that point, is there anyone with a question on what GitHub is and understanding what version control is if I proceed? Okay, then I continue and maybe give you a demo of how this works. Increase the size of this. I hope that's clear now. Now, I created so in GitHub, for you to host your various files or code, you can create a repository. So by creating a repository, you just come here and click on new. You write your repo name, let's say test repo, and then you can give it description. And you can maybe initialize it to the README file, which is just a basic description of what's happening, like what does this repository contain. This collection of files, repository just like a collection of files in this case, in the context of GitHub. So when you click on that, it creates this for you, and then it gives you these options. You can just copy this into your command line, and it will be able to initialize everything for you from your local machine. Now, for you to do this, like you can see, these are Git commands. That means that you should have already downloaded Git and installed it. I'll share with you a link on that would guide you on how to do that, how to install Git and do the configuration, or maybe someone else could share in the chat. And so like within this repository, what I could do is that I could maybe just copy this and maybe just go here. And paste that. Git remote add this repo for just a minute. Branch. Remove repository from the command line. Okay, as you can see that already there's some we already have here, like we already cloned that repo, and we have some changes here that want to be tracked, of which I don't want those to be tracked. So I'll just delete that. Anyway, so during the creation, you can just copy this. You can just copy this and then paste it in your PowerShell or your command line tool that you're using. If you're using Linux distros, you could be using your terminal to do that. Now, back to the test repo that I created here. The demo repo that I created here. Oh, by there you can see the repo is already here. If someone else wants to contribute, what they would do is that they will clone that repo. So what you will do, there's a command called Git Clone. You just type a command like this, Git Clone, and then paste that URL there. And then it will bring down, or it will fetch all the files, and you'll be having all that information within your local machine. And you can make the changes or continue your development from your local machine. And then once you're done with the changes, you could always push them back to the shared repository. Okay. Any question there? How to create a repo? Oh, I should increase my font size. Is it on the GitHub or on the PowerShell? It'll be here, I guess. I guess that's clear now. Okay, cool. Now, so I created this demo repo here, and you can see I just added some Python files. This one does an addition. So you can see what it does. It adds one number to another. And then I also created something to test it. Like if I'm adding 2 to 3, what should the result be? It should be 5, right? So during your development, it's good. It's a good practice to always ensure that you test your product. It's a way of assuring yourself that whatever the change that we add, the initial changes do not break. So there should be no instance in time whereby this method should not be able to add one number to another. Now, it would not be very helpful if all the time you have to run this from your local machine and there's no form of visibility whether these tests are failing or they're passing before you add a new change to this repository. So about adding changes, we need to say like, how do we add changes to a given repo? So that brings us to commits. Now, let me just go back here. Okay, so now, first of all, there's what we call branching in Git. So branching is like you have different streams of changes. So let's say you are working on authentication. You can create create a different stream where you have those changes. And then once you're done making those changes and implementing that, you can have those changes merged into the shared main branch that each and every team member has in their local machine, or that is being deployed in your server. So let's say, let me check out the main branch. So to check out, you just say git checkout, and then you specify the branch. So I've checked out to the main branch here. If I want to make changes, let's say I want to work on a new feature, I could create a new branch. Let's say authentication. Let's call it auth. So when I'm in this auth, I can now make some changes. Let me create, let's say, a new file here. Let's say auth.py. Now, this is a new change that is being added. So let me say, so let's say you've implemented your authentication, and now you want to push them and have them added to the main branch and eventually deployed. So you can always see the files that you made changes to. Like in this case, I've made changes to this file called auth.py file. So I could add that change. For you to add a change, that is for Git to track it. So Git tracks these changes in a special form of database. So for you to ensure that Git tracks it, you use git add as the command for it. So once you add it, if you do a git status, you can see it's already added there, but then you need to commit with a message like, what is this change? So you say git commit. It's like instructing Git that I'm making this change, and this is what this change is all about. So adding auth file. That's what we are doing, right? So you've already added that. If you try to do git status to see the status of the file, so that there are any information that you've added or any changes that you've made but you've not tracked them, or you've not added them to, you've not told Git to track them, you can do git status. You can see there's nothing to commit. Everything is clean. Unlike this stage here, where we had some changes that were not yet added or committed. Now, once you're done with that, you can now push the changes. Now, you'll see this information here. You can either configure your Git so that you do not have to, okay, first of all, this branch is not tracked upstream. So you can set it upstream so that whenever you make any changes, you do not have to like do git push origin that branch. You can decide to use the command git push origin this branch to push the changes that way, or you can set this change upstream, and then whenever you make any changes in future, you'll just use the command git push. Now, I've already pushed these changes to our repository. If you come to our repo here, you'll see there's a new branch called auth that has been created. Now, once this branch is created, you need to create a pull request, because in this case, you're collaborating with somebody. If you're the owner of this repository, you could make the changes and push them directly to main, but it's not a good practice because somehow you might lose track of which changes happened where. But it's a good practice that if you're collaborating in teams, you need to at least inform the other that this is the change that I want to add. Do you think there's any other thing that I need to add to it, or anything that it could be breaking, or any improvement that I could make to it? So to do that, you create what we call a pull request. So this branch is already pushed, and then you create a pull request. You could give a description of what your pull request is all about. Let's say implementing authentication. You could add a description. So sometimes you could have not maybe finished with the implementation. So before you finish the implementation, when you're not ready for this code to be reviewed by your team members, you could create a draft pull request. So every person who comes to this pull request, they know that this is a pull request, but then it's not complete. It's not in a done state. So we might need to wait for the owner of the pull request to finish everything, and then they publish it for us to be able to review. Now, any other team member who comes will go to the pull request, and then they'll be able to see the files change and see the change that you added. Like you can see in this case, it was this method that we added here. And then once you're done with your changes and the implementation, what you'll do, you'll make this pull request be ready for review. And then the team members will come and review the changes. And then they could either leave some comments or request some changes. And once that is done, the owner of the repo or any person who is given permission to be able to merge pull requests will be able to merge this pull request. Now, since we need people to collaborate in this repo, you could either fork the repository, or as the owner of the repository, you could go to the repo settings, where the settings. You could either go to the repository settings and add people as the collaborators to that. It should be somewhere here. I can't see my repository settings, and I'm done with this repo. Yeah, it's here. It was hidden. Good. So you can go to, once you click on setting, go to collaborators, and then you will be able to invite. So you put their usernames or their emails here, invite them, then they'll be able to join as collaborators, clone the repo, and be able to do all these operations that we have here. Okay, any question up to that point? What does origin mean on GitHub? Okay, this is not just on GitHub, it is in Git. So origin is like a way of specifying that whatever it is that I'm doing, it's a local change, but then I want it to be tracked on the upstream. So for instance, so like here, when we said git push set upstream origin auth, so we are instructing Git that we want this branch to be pushed to the repository upstream, such that whenever I'll be making any changes, I will not have to push the changes by specifying that git push origin to this branch. So what I'll do, let me just show you an example. What I'll do next is that, let's say I make some implementation, or maybe just add some comment. So the next time I make that change, you can see I've made that change. And by the way, you could use git diff to see the change that you added. Like in this case, it is this comment here. And then I could either add that file, or if let's say you don't want to add each and every file, you can use a. This means all. So git add all, and then I could do the commit, add comment. Now, this time around, since I already set this one upstream, I'll just do git push. So that will push my changes to, this branch here. And if you look at the changes, you can see the comment has been added there. So it's like a way of telling Git that what I want to do is that I want to be able to communicate to the upstream repository in that way. Okay. Any other question before I move to the next thing? Okay. Now, once this is done, what you'll do, once this has been reviewed and everything is okay, your code will be merged. So what merging does is that the merging will ensure that your code now is in the main branch. Now, if you go to this repository, you can see that our default branch here is the main branch. In other cases, it's the master. So once we do the merging, all those changes will be brought to the main branch. And whenever everyone pulls the changes to their local machines or the deployment is done in the server, it will be done with that change. But that is relative. Like there are other people who do deployment depending on what they release. So it's in accordance with how you've organized your stuff. So when I merge those changes, I've decided to delete that branch so that we don't have a clutter of several branches. That change, you can see here, is that indication that I merged this pull request. And if you look at the file here, you realize that that change, let me just refresh this. Go to demo. Why did we add the file? Auth. Yeah, you can see there's that file auth here has already been added. And anybody who is working on the main branch, we could check out the main branch. And you can see it tells you that there's some changes that were already added. So you can pull in those changes to your local machine. You can see that right here, we don't have this. We don't have that auth file that we created. But we could pull those changes and have them. So right now we have that auth file that we created. So this means that we could have many people collaborating. They could create their own branches with their own streams of work and then continue doing their development. And then once they're done, they could always merge in the changes. And then each and every person could get a copy of that, of those updates that have already been made. So that's why version control is a very good way to collaborate as a team. So whenever you make these changes, it's a good practice to always review each other's pull requests to validate that everything is okay. But we know that using the human eye, sometimes you might miss a lot of things. Like there could be some small addition that could be making something to break, and you could not catch it by just looking at the code itself. It could be maybe several lines of code that have been changed. So it might be hard for you to actually track everything and know everything that maybe this is a code base that is 10 years old. You could not know, like maybe something that was made in 2016, something that was made in 2016, and maybe this addition could be breaking that part of the application, and you might never know this until there's an outage. So how do we ensure that this is covered? We usually ensure that this is covered by adding some either you could add unit tests or integration tests or any other form of testing or end-to-end tests. Now, GitHub has GitHub Actions, and GitHub Actions helps you create such kind of pipelines where you could do the testing, and you can also use them for deployment, just like you had been shown. So, if I want to add, let's say, I want to add an action to do some form of testing for each and every pull request before it's merged to the main branch, you can click on the actions and then new workflow, and then you could search. Like in this case, our code base is a Python code. You could search Python and then maybe choose the one that is good for you. So let's say if it's a Python application, or maybe if it's Django, you could choose Django. So you can see here that there's already a YAML file created for you that would help you with all that configuration. So even if, let's say, you want to do, let's say, deployment of the app on Azure, you can configure that, and the GitHub Actions will be able to help with all that workload. So you must not have somebody who is dedicated to manually pulling the code to your server and ensuring that everything is deployed. You could just configure that. For the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to show you a GitHub action for testing. So I created a pull request here. What I did is just search in that GitHub among the GitHub actions and chose the one for Python. Now, if you look at it, there is a good view. If you look at it, there are various configuration. It tells you whenever we push changes to this branch, it will perform these jobs. Or whenever you create a pull request that will be adding change to the main branch, it will perform these checks. But then in this case, what it will be doing is just running a Python test. Now, from the history of this file, you can see that whenever I was adding some changes, some things were failing. For instance, in this case here, when I created that file, there are some things that are already failing. There are some Python packages that could not be installed. So that means that I need to fix it before this code is checked in. And then when I fixed those packages, there were also there were some issues also with some importation. So let's look at here. So the problem was actually within the code itself. So it had issues doing some import. So it could not find this module here. So in that case, I needed to fix that for the test to run successfully. So right now, this code here, or this code here, it has an issue. Let's say it could be having an issue, this test here. And the way to validate that all the time, instead of having to let humans go and check whether everything is done correctly, you could add such kind of unit tests to be able to catch those cases. So let's add some other example, assuming that besides this addition here that we have, we want to ensure that we are able to add strings. So let's say if someone decided to input something like 1 and 2, they should be able to add this one successfully and give a result of 3. So in that case, we are like extending the functionality of our application. So let me just pull the changes. And then let's create a new branch. And this branch, what it will be doing is that it will be adding strings, So we already have that branch. Now, let's extend the functionality of this code to ensure that it's able to add strings. So first of all, if this is less than new functionality that we have, we could start by adding a test case to ensure that strings are actually able to be added by this code. So we can say def test addition of strings. So we say our result will be, we are adding, like in this case, 2 to 3. And then we need to ensure that our result is equivalent to 5. Now, let's assume that when you are doing this implementation, you are not sure that this would be the case, but sometimes you could have actually forgotten that this is actually a scenario that needs to be captured. So let's say you've added your small unit test for it, and let's push that. So M stands for message. If you don't put the M, it will create for you a file to be able to put your instructions. So I think this is Vim. Yeah, this is definitely Vim. So if you're someone who understands Vim, you could be able to, you press the I command and you'll go to add the message, the commit message. So in this case, we are going to say adding test case addition method or function. And then you'll be able to save those changes, and then you can push this. You can push those changes upstream. And once you have your changes, you can create a pull request. Add your description, then create your pull request there. And then you wait for all the other checks to be done. Now, if you look at our main branch here, you can see there is a check here that ensures that everything You can see there were checks that were performed here to ensure that everything was okay, to ensure that all the tests passed successfully and all. So you can see, you can come here and see that this test passed. So let's go back to our pull request, assuming that you made all the changes, but you're not sure if there's anything that worked. You can see there's something that was broken here, or something that is not necessarily broken, but there's some test that is failing. And if you look at it, you can see that whenever an assertion was done, the result was 23, because we know that string addition in Python, what it does is that it concatenates them. So it just appends this one to the other. So what we had is 23, but not 5. So that means that this the existing code does not support that functionality. So what we do next is to implement that functionality. And one way to do that is that if you're just going to add integers, you can just cast. You can just do the casting that way and maybe push the changes and see. Now we have those changes. We have those changes pushed to the pull request, and now it should pass. You could maybe just look at it. It is starting the job. It's installing the dependencies or the packages that we require. It already ran the tests. See that one here. So it already ran the unit test and everything is passing there. So that is how you could leverage GitHub Actions to have some form of quality assurance that everything works and nothing is broken before making any new changes or before merging anything. And this could help you prevent outages and they're having to rush maybe when you are about to do demos. And if let's say something is broken, it's easy to revert those changes. So let's say we merge this in and it breaks something. So something is broken, but then we want to see like what was it that made. So we know that initially everything was working until this PR was merged. So you could revert those changes by trying to see the PR that could have caused those issues to arise. So you can go to that PR and then you can always revert. Before I do the reversion of that PR, let's check out main and see that the changes were actually there. So you can see the changes were already here. And maybe that was causing something to break. You could maybe just revert this pull request. And then after reverting the pull request, maybe now you could have the application now will be in its stable state. And then you could maybe, so once you've already reverted, like you've created a pull request to revert. So you have to merge this pull request. And you can see what this pull request does. It will remove the changes that were added by the previous pull request. So once the reviews are done and everything is okay, you merge this pull request. It will remove those changes that were added by the other pull request. And see those ones change. You see the changes have already been removed and your application would be stable again. And now you could go back, since these history logs are there, you could now go back as a team and debug and see what could have caused that issue and open a pull request with the changes. So you see, it also helps. You don't have to like start from scratch that, oh, we lost that whole code. Now we have to start from scratch. No, you already have all those changes. You see what was removed and what needs to be added or any other history that is important to the team. Any question up to that point? So we've gone through repository, we've gone through what commits are and branching. We've gone through pull requests, code reviews, merging, and GitHub Actions. So I would advise you to, so in GitHub Actions, there are also ways you could set environment variables for those applications that require environment variables. So you could go and maybe do some digging on other information on how to configure GitHub Actions. And then for version control, you could use this. Maybe I could share the link with you. You could use, there's a documentation, unofficial documentation for Git that could help you learn more about Git commands and any other thing that you require to learn on Git. There are also some nice video tutorials from that site that you could use. Okay, any question? Going once, going twice. Okay, I'll assume there's no question. If there's any other question, feel free to post it on the chat. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, Ryan, you have a couple of questions on chat.
Let me see. Okay, so there's one. Is use of GitHub an alternative to Azure Pipelines? You can use GitHub as an alternative to Azure Repos for code hosting, and you can use GitHub Actions as an alternative to the Azure Pipelines. So GitHub Actions help you perform it could help you with the deployment and testing. So it's like continuous deployment and the continuous integration. So like, let's say there are tests that you need to perform before you deploy. There are certain, let's say, bits that you need to be signed, or any other activities that could be performed by, let's say, a DevOps engineer before the deployments are done. You could always automate those and put them either in Azure Pipeline, or if you're using GitHub Action, you could use them there. And all these configurations, most of them could be done using the YAML files. Emphasis on how we're connecting GitHub and Azure. I think you already shown how we connect GitHub and Azure, how you could be able to do that. The previous, I think Cyrus already gave a demo on that. Or maybe Cyrus could unmute and explain more. Is Cyrus still on the call? If he's on the call, is muted. I don't have a demo repo set up. I could have shown how that is done. But if you watch this video, this call is recorded. If you watch it, you'll see a section where Cyrus gave a demo on how you could connect your GitHub repository to Azure Pipelines. I don't know if that would help much. Any other question? Or anyone who would want to chime in on that? Feel free. Back to you, Irene.
Okay, I think you can hear me now. So thank you very much, Brian, for taking us through the session. I'm going to open up to see if we have any questions. Okay, on yesterday's recording, I think it was shared by the equity team. I'll just check if they're able to reshare with you. On the last question, I'm going to have someone from the equity team answer that, if in terms of the technologies they need to use. But we're just showing you what's available in terms of that you can actually use your Azure credits to create and host your solutions, so that it's even easy for you to share once you're going through judging. The judge is able to go in and check what you're doing. Okay, how do you create a branch in GitHub? Brian, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, to create a branch on GitHub, you could do that from the command line. So maybe I could just share my screen and show you how that is done. Could you confirm whether you could see my screen, Irene? I'll assume. Oh, let me see. Okay. You could use a git command to create a branch. So what you could do is do git checkout, specify B stands for branch, and then the branch name. So let's say new branch. So what you do is use the command git checkout, specify that what you're doing is a branch, you're creating a new branch, and then you specify this, now your branch name, you could call it anything that you want. Yes, someone has raised up their hand. You could maybe unmute and ask your question.
Hello, hi.
Hey.
Hope you can hear me. This is Brian,
Yeah, I can hear you, Brian.
University of Nairobi. So I asked this question: if you have done already a project in your desktop PC or whatever, so you want to upload it in your GitHub account so that you can be checking out for future reference. How do you do it? I didn't see it in your demo.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, good question. So there's this repository that we created initially. It was called test repo. Or maybe we could create anyone. So now what you could do, let me just create a folder. Let's call it test. Now, it's already having Git. Oh, it doesn't. Okay. So what you could do is that assuming that you have your folder called test repo, where you made your changes. Let's say you have a project there. Let's just say we could maybe create a file. Let's say we have some file there that you created, and what you can do is initialize it by using the command git init. When you use git init, you'll see the changes there. You'll now be able to track the changes from here. And then now you go to GitHub and create. You could create now your repository that will store that file. Let's say new repo. And once you do that, you could just copy this and run it here. Then you'll be able to push that. And once you have that, you already have your README file there. And then now you can start pushing your changes from there. Now add the some file. And your repo now should be having all your files. Does that answer your question, Brian, or you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, sure, but is there a way that you can avoid from you just have to go to your Git, then you have to write those codes on your maybe
Oh, you mean like a UI kind of thing?
I just want to import it, those
Yes.
files, the project.
You could actually upload the files.
All right, yeah.
You could upload the files.
So you just have to
Files on your
upload
computer.
it. Okay, okay.
And then you commit and push.
Even
Or
the
you could also
codes.
yeah, even the code, you could do that.
All right.
And then another thing is that you could also download the GitHub desktop application to help with some of those.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Any other question? Okay, I can see we have 5 minutes left. Over to you, Erin. No, we can't. Now we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I think it was just my headset. Okay, thank you so much, Brian, for taking us through GitHub. I don't think we have any other question. In case of anything, then you can just put it on the chat. We'll be able to address. In terms of yesterday's recording, it will be shared today with the same recording. Yes, Brian.
Yeah, about the recording.